Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's AGC of America WebEd, Value of Marketing Communications for Contractors. My name is Paige Packard, and I am the Associate Director in the Building Division here at AGC. Before we begin today's webinar, there is some basic GoToWebinar information I'd like to share. First is how you can ask questions. On your screens on the GoToWebinar toolbar, you should see the questions box. Please use this area for submitting questions, both of a technical nature and webinar content. Also, please feel free to submit questions as they occur to you, but be aware that we will be holding off answering questions until today's speaker has completed his presentation. Except for the speaker and moderator, attendees will be muted for the duration of the webinar. Please note that all registrants for today's webinar will receive an email within the next 3 to 5 business days with the PDF PowerPoint slides and the webinar recording. Now let's go ahead and get started with today's webinar. In today's construction market, contractors must rely on branding their business beyond the bid price, particularly in the more lucrative private client category. Embracing marketing as an investment has the potential to develop new technologies, expand a business, and deliver growth. Telling a unique story is vital for contractors to grow the industry and their businesses beyond a commodity. This webinar will provide audience members insight into how marketing executions like web design and development, social media, advertising will bring more value. Additionally, the webinar will challenge you to consider marketing and communications tactics as a method of growing your business on multiple levels beyond the bid. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker and session moderator. Rick Guzman is Senior Manager of Business Development for Resendin Electric and a member of AGC's Business Development Forum Steering Committee. His responsibilities include establishing and maintaining client relationships, research and analysis of the marketplace, and tracking and maintaining the status of developing projects. A Long Beach State graduate, Rick is involved in the company's strategic planning process and works closely with Resendin's pre-construction group in developing estimates and proposals. A 35-year construction industry veteran, Rick has held a variety of construction management positions and has served on boards with NECA, MCA, and SMPS. Rick is currently serving on the AGC Silicon Valley Chapter Board of Directors. Following today's presentation, Rick will moderate the question and answer portion. We will share a final thought or two and conclude at 3 p.m. Eastern. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Rick to get us started. Rick, it's all yours.
Thank you, Paige, and welcome everyone to today's exciting webinar. As Paige stated, I serve on AGC's Business Development Forum Steering Committee and wanted to tell our participants a little bit about the Business Development Forum before we get started. The Business Development Forum is a community of over 900 active members of many company sizes and types. Whether your focus is on business development, sales, proposal writing, marketing, or graphic design, all AGC members are invited to join and participate in the forum to find out more about the latest tips and trends in business development. The forum is driven by 11 steering committee members who help determine our initiatives in bringing resources to the forum membership. If you are an AGC member, I encourage you to visit the BD Forum webpage at www.agc.org/BD and click on the Join the Forum button to join us and learn more about how we can help you in your business. For those of you who aren't AGC members, we have a LinkedIn showcase group, which you can find if you research for the company AGC of America on the LinkedIn platform. This group is open to all of our industry partners, such as SMPS and AIA, and other relevant groups to promote mutually beneficial discussions on business development across a wider spectrum. Now I'd like to go ahead and get us started with our introducing to you our today's speaker and forum, AGC Business Development Forum Speaking Committee member, Chris Martin. As founder and president of Atlas Marketing, a specialty agency with big experience, Chris is responsible for setting its path. His vision guides the agency from talent acquisition to services and client strategy. His approach is simple, and he lives by a few golden rules. Push yourself to be the best, collaboration is a key, and always say thank you. Since hanging a shingle and working from his dining room table in 2008, Atlas has grown to include 2 offices where he manages a culture at Atlas that is collaborative, exciting, and effective. Chris also encourages his team to experiment with new ideas and challenge the status quo, which ensures the Atlas culture will thrive. Throughout a career spanning over 2 decades, Chris has partnered with clients in need of strategic marketing direction, and communications counsel in the aerospace, automotive, biotech, construction, food manufacturing, healthcare, industrial, and manufacturing industries. He has won numerous awards, served on various regional community boards, and coached middle and high school basketball for years. Thank you for being here, Chris. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rick, for that very nice introduction. And Paige, thank you for pulling this together and supporting our efforts. I appreciate it from both of you. Well, thank you for being here today. As both Rick and Paige mentioned, we're going to talk about the value of marketing communications. And what I wanted to start off with is just defining that marketing communications component. For those of you that aren't aware of what marketing communications is, it's basically an integrated campaign approach and looking at all the vehicles that we could use to tell the story for not only for contractors, but for variety of industries. And really what it comes down to is really focusing on how we tell the story and what that means for the vehicles that we utilize. And in this case, the vehicles could be anything from advertising to social media, websites, just a variety of ways to get our story out there. So today, what we're going to talk about really is focusing on that story, not only on the slide that you see in front of you, the objectives, but you've already heard it said a couple times, but you can see on the slide it's there a couple times. Really what we want to focus on is what does it mean to develop a story and how does that really affect general contractors? And what is the impact of utilizing that approach so that you can grow your business and it becomes less of a commodity approach. I know just from working for general contractors, you know, bid day is always a massive day. And it's also a very stressful day and a lot hinges on that day. So how can we try to help to make that less stressful, but more importantly, really focus on ways to help your customers really understand what it is that you do, and more importantly, help them select you. So with that, I want to issue a challenge. And that challenge is not just for you as a participant today, but more importantly to the whole industry. And that is to get away from the traditional mindset. And for the sake of the discussion and moving forward, I'll call that traditional marketing mindset the safe, on time, on budget messaging. And please understand, I am not advocating or saying that we should get away from those things. Safety is a massive priority across the industry, and more importantly, so is completing projects on time and within budgets. But the fact of the matter is if all of the contractors across the country are saying that, think about it. If there's 25 different contractors in your individual market, and each of you are saying the same thing, which is safe, on time, on budget, how can you stand out? How does that really affect the industry? It basically forces customers to think of the industry in terms of a commodity, because that's the only way that we're setting ourselves apart. So as we talk today and engage with each other and have a conversation at the end of the discussion, we really want to try to focus on telling a story that will make it easy for our future customers to select us. And when I say us, and I'm referring to you as well, but really trying to put us all together, because right now, as an industry, we're not doing a good job helping our customers find us and select us. And we're not making it easy for them to really hire the right contracting firm if all they're doing is focusing on the bottom line. So to do that, to break away from this mindset, there's a couple things that we want to establish first. First is develop that marketing communications plan. Just like any job site that you're on or any project that you're working on, you're always going to have a plan. whether that is a safety plan, an equipment delivery plan, installation plan, all of those things, even to that point, a drug testing plan. Why wouldn't your marketing be any different? So again, really developing that marketing communications plan helps you establish yourself from your competition, but more importantly, again, help your customer find you and really make it easy for them. And there's going to be some things that I'm going to say over and over again today in our short time, and this is going to be one of them. Let's make sure that we're finding ways to help our customers select us and find ways to go beyond the budget and really build that relationship that we all want in the design build categories. So the first part of that marketing communications plan is to establish your values. And we've already acknowledged the fact that our industry is based on 3 pillars, which is safe, on time, and on budget. But again, that's not really going to help us set ourselves apart. So as a general contractor or the owner of a contracting firm or the marketing director, I think there's some things that you can really start to ask yourself as where you want to go. And part of that really starts with the values. So I look at the values as an important element of this because it really starts to establish what makes your company unique, what helps you stand apart from your competition. How do you do things differently? So that's how we establish at Atlas Marketing those values. And it really should be focused on the company, but with a heavy bent toward making your customers understand what it is that you do. So with that, we also want to establish some brand elements. And I think the slide. Uh-oh. Now my slide isn't working. Well, anyway, we want to talk about establishing the brand, and as it relates to general contractors and the construction industry as a whole. It's the brand. I equate it to being your promise. And I have to admit, I'm getting a signal on my screen that says the connection was lost. So hopefully everyone can still hear me. I'll keep talking.
I can hear you, and I'm just going through I'm doing the PowerPoint slides for you.
Thank you, Paige. So if you can just go back one slide, sorry, to establish your brand. So what the brand really relates to as it ties in with the story component is that the brand should be your promise. And the real question to ask yourself as marketers is, how do we live up to that promise? For example, I'll give you some examples. So there's 2 real national brands, global brands that stand out for me in this world. And one is Nike. You know, when you hear of Nike or you see Nike ads, the promise of having the ability to execute or compete at a major level, athletic level, is in everything that they do. From their tagline of just do it all the way down to the design of the apparel or the shoes. Everything is focused on giving you that experience and the ability to use the same equipment that world-class athletes use. So when I talk about the brand or the promise, that's an example there. Another one is Amazon. And the reason I include Amazon is primarily they make it so easy for their customers to order and purchase things. And the aspect of their promise is that we're going to get things to you quicker, faster, and more efficiently than anyone else. And whether you're for the big brands versus the smaller brands is something that we can talk about later. But the aspect of Amazon making it easy for their customers, I think, is pretty phenomenal from the standpoint of how to incorporate a brand into the construction industry. And really, your brand should also differentiate you from the competitors. So clearly, again, as we've talked already, we don't want to have our marketing or our story focusing on those pillars of safe, on time, on budget. I challenge you to find other ways to say those things. So with that, you've heard me talk about story a lot. And what I want to do here is just give a little side story, if you will, on what it means to establish a story and how we kind of came across this. We have our own, at Atlas, we have our own process that we go through. And it's three pillars that we call listen, engage, and connect. And under the listen component, what we end up doing is that's where we establish our message. We establish our story. We will talk with customers. We'll talk with suppliers. We'll really gain a solid understanding of where the company is at that moment. And I encourage each of you as the marketer in your firm to consider that as the first step in the process. The second step is the engage component, and that's where we really want to take the story out so that our customers can hear and see and engage with our story. And the last part being the connect part, and that is how you can reach out and modify and really build that connection with your customer, because over time you're going to modify your story in a variety of different ways. So that's the process that we go through. And again, I encourage you to consider that as you're building your own story within this process. So the next evolution of the discussion really comes down to what makes a good story. And for me, what it came down to, I'm going to share a little quick story here. So my father is an engineer by trade. He worked in local government. And for the longest time when I was in college and after college, he would ask me over and over again, help me understand what your communications degree is going to do. Very analytical person. And I would always respond with the basic marketing response of, we're going to connect and do all these things that just really no one knows unless you're a marketing student at the time. One night, my father and I were out, and he asked the question again, and I just simply looked at him. I go, Dad, I'm just telling stories. That's what I'm going to do. And he looked at me and laughed, and he says, it's taken you long enough. Why can't you simplify that when you tell other people what you're doing? And right there, a light bulb went on, and I said, he's a smart guy. He's really helping me out here. So that story of how we came about, our philosophical approach to marketing, I think is relevant here, because it is get away from what you're comfortable with. And I encourage each of you to look at ways that you can simplify what it is that you do. Construction is a very complex issue, or a complex industry, I should say, and how that story relates to your customers, because that is the most important element of anything that you do. So the next question that typically comes out of this conversation is what are the elements of a good story? And on the slide right now, you see that, a good story should capture your attention. A good story has to address that need. More importantly, it drives people to do something, whether it's asking questions or taking action or doing something in a way that catapults action. And most important, as the story I shared with you, it needs to be simple. And the reason I say that is, again, construction being such a complex industry, and there's so many things going on a job site, that it's very important to simplify, because not every single one of your customers is going to understand what it is that you do. And it's our job as marketers to help them understand it so that they can select us. It's literally that simple. So let me share with you a couple examples of how we apply that story approach into campaigns. On the screen, you'll see in the top left corner is a billboard that we did for the ironworkers local here in Pittsburgh. And the tagline on the billboard says, "We don't go to the office, we build it." And the reason for that, in our research prior to the campaign launching, was that we found that not many people knew what an iron worker does. And so we looked at that initial campaign as a way to introduce what the iron worker does. And again, it's simple. It allows people to understand it, and it's relatable. Don't necessarily have to know exactly what the iron workers do, but now I know that they build buildings, and they are the ones that help me go to work. The other two images that you see are from another campaign that we did over a larger area, over a 5-state campaign. And we wanted to take that promise of building buildings and expand it more. So the story is that iron workers do more. Iron workers do more than what you know, not just building buildings, but they're setting statues for the Korean War Memorial. On the right-hand side is an image of a brochure, and there's a roller coaster that was set, and the structural steel was set by the iron workers. And so the whole campaign really focused on showcasing what construction trades, and in particular in this instance the iron workers, are helping people live their daily lives. And so the story around that is iron workers do more than what you know. And building off of the research and the focal point of all of those things, that really helped us bring a story that not only drove recruitment, considerable amounts of recruitment over the area that we were working in, but more importantly, it allowed people to understand what iron workers do. And I think that's important related to the construction industry, and as we're talking today. So to go beyond that, to help with understanding how to develop a story, I think it's important to really look at the trends that are taking place in the marketing world. Because in my opinion, I think it's very important for us to market the industry and the contractors who work in that industry to get away from that commodity component. You know, not every construction project should be thought of as the bottom line, who is the cheaper contractor. And that is something that I think we can all work toward to get away from, and I think you'll all agree with me. But looking at the trends, today marketing trends are primarily held around the digital world. And, you know, acknowledging that driving a service company such as a general contractor to solely focus on data may not make sense, but let me help explain that. There's a couple things that you can do from a trend perspective that will help drive business and, more importantly, engagement with your customers. And one is lead generation. So how are you, as the marketer in your company or the owner of the company, looking at ways to generate leads? And it's simple. You have to really help your customers find you. And that is typically done today through websites and digital ads and driving people to a central location. And that part of the story starts to come into play. And the other side of it, and from a trends perspective and data, is really capturing as much data as the visitor will allow you. One of the things that we've done here at Atlas is we've incorporated a chatbot on our website, and it's really helped in terms of lead generation and having conversations immediately on our website. And the big point of that is make yourself available to your customers. And more importantly, make yourself available when they are looking for information. I think that will be more helpful to the marketers in our audience today. And moving forward, the other element of this is utilize the creative elements that you have at your disposal to really support your story. And when I say creative and design, you know, admittedly, I'm talking about from an agency perspective, and you know, the layouts and elements that can help tell the story visually. I think that's important, but also too, get creative in the way that you're getting your story in front of your customers. I think the exactness of construction is really supported well by creative elements, whether that is at networking functions or at inviting customers in, or even open house events on job sites. Finding ways to creatively reinforce your brand and tell your story to these customers is going to be helpful in building your company and moving forward. And to that point, I think it's very important to find unique aspects of your business. And the way that we go about that here, following our Listen, Engage, Connect process, is through a strategy session. We'll actually do an exercise that we call the 5 whys. And literally we'll throw out a question, and we'll ask those in participation, tell us why you thought that. So for example, a general contractor may say, we build very big buildings. Okay, that's great. Why? Why did you do that? Why did you start with building buildings? And how can we really drive that story component to be much more focused, much more simple in its approach? And from there, asking yourself, as whether if you're the marketing person or the owner of the company, or even in the leadership component, ask those questions and take the time to really think about what makes you different from the competition. And I would say probably the most important element of that is to also ask your customers. Speak with them, survey them, do everything you can to get in front of them and ask what it is that makes you so unique and why they hired you. Because that will help to cultivate the story as well. And really, it starts to evolve over time, and that's really what happens with a good story. So for example, the unique component of BIM, several years ago, that created a unique advantage for companies that invested in BIM. But today, it's almost like an expected perk of the industry from the customer's perspective. So your story, as I said, is going to evolve, and it's going to continue to evolve, and how you approach it, not only from a technology standpoint, but from an innovative standpoint, is going to help really generate more opportunities for you to talk beyond just we build buildings, and go from there. So kind of transitioning into the next element of our discussion here. I think it's very important for marketers and owners of companies to understand that it's absolute that you have to go outside of your office and market, but your biggest brand ambassadors and biggest cheerleaders, if you will, are going to be the ones inside. And really understanding that need to focus your story, not only externally, but internally, is something that is very valuable. I'll share a quick story. A former client of mine was Zippo, the pocket lighters, and they're made here in Pennsylvania, and they're very high quality. But one of the things that the original owner, Mr. Blaisdell, came up with was a lifetime guarantee. And I saw this firsthand. I was at the factory, and they have a repair center off to the side, and typically people would just send in their lighters, and they'd get fixed, and they'd send them back. But this instance, the lighter, actually someone had written a story along with it, and that was, my grandfather was fishing out on the lake by our family home, and dropped his lighter in the pond. Over time, his great-grandson was fishing one day, caught a fish, and went to clean the fish and found the lighter inside the fish. So they sent it back to Zippo and thought, hey, let's see if they'll fix it. But what amazed me the most, and why this I think is important here, is and the need to market inside. the person that was starting the repair on this, and the lighter actually had barnacles on it. I mean, it was so badly waterlogged and no way it was ever going to work. She pulled everyone around and said, look at this. I want to read this story out loud. Reads the story. And then literally afterwards, people start clapping. And I asked someone, I said, why did you start clapping? And they said, because we know we're going to fix that. And so that to me just encompasses having this whole story component internally and having people that really acknowledge and understand what that stands for and really stand behind it. Because I know that in construction in particular, it's very difficult to have people that are outside of the office, the field folks, really understand what it means to be a part of the company. And I think that story to me resonates on the need to really market internally as well as externally. And it kind of leads into the next slide here, which is pretty straightforward. And I'm sure that everyone has heard this, and this is the goal of all marketing, is that every person is a salesperson, whether they want to admit it or not. So the question is, are they telling consistent message, and are they telling a consistent story? And the real test of that, if you have a good story in place, is if people on your team are saying it back to you. I'll give you an example, another example from a general contractor that I worked for. Every time the president of the company, the owner, would go to job sites, there were always subs who would have radios on the job site. And he would go around and unplug every single one of them and then pull everybody together and say, it is our policy that there are no boom boxes, no radios being played on the job, because that is a safety violation. And the reason I bring that up is, in complete contrast to the Zippo story, realistically, the job superintendent or the project manager should have been going around and unplugging those radios. And now safety has become such a priority, that element of telling a story consistently internally is going to be very, very helpful in portraying that story beyond the walls of the company. So, I went too far, sorry. This is one of my favorite quotes, and it's from Coach John Wooden, and it's simple. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. And the reason I bring this up is, if you don't take the time to understand or develop a story that you can understand yourself, how can you achieve your goals? And more importantly, let's take that one step further. If you don't have a solid understanding of how, or more importantly, how you're going to use your story, but what that story is, how can your customers know to select you? And that's, every time I hear this quote or see the quote, that's how I kind of phrase it in my head. Is it falls back to developing a story that will really, really help your customers know that they should select you, whether it is for your experience, for the technical expertise, all of those things coming together to tell the story that will help you build a brand and really build your business. So some of the challenges that I see in accepting this and working within this framework is that traditional mindset. It's still prevalent, and I think it's going to remain prevalent for quite some time as it relates to the construction industry, and that is that safe, on time, on budget. And again, I want to emphasize, I am not against, taking shortcuts and going the unsafe route. But again, if every contractor is saying the same thing, are we really setting ourselves apart? So I think I see that as a challenge. As it relates to safety and ongoing changes within the industry, I think the customer expectations are shifting. Not only are they expecting things done faster and more efficiently, but more importantly, they're also expecting things done as safe as possible and with a distinct focus on their needs. rather than the contractor's needs. And that also relates into a longer sales cycle. Currently, as you all know, the industry is facing challenges of hiring people. That's because there's so much work to be done. 5 years, the projections are that that's not going to be as high. So managing that story and developing that story is going to help make those sales cycles shorter, because we're making it easier for customers to really understand who they should hire, and really focusing on those values and the experience and the expertise that specific contractors bring to the table versus the standard message. So what you can expect from embracing this story approach, and one is, it's definitely going to take you some time. I won't lie. Really diving into understanding the difference between your company and another company, it takes some time, and it takes experienced people to help you through that process. And I think that's important, because for the industry to move forward, it's going to take us some time to develop the stories and really have a solid plan in place that will allow the marketers and the support teams that you have in place at your companies to really push the plan and work it so that the story is being heard effectively, and it's engaged properly, and it's in the right venue. As I mentioned at the beginning, the marketing communications aspects of the vehicle components and the integration of all the elements that we have in the marketing world really make it more of a challenge for the marketing team to tell the story, because there's so many opportunities to develop that engagement and that connection. Excuse me, I'm going to take a quick drink. The other aspect of that is balancing the internal message with your external audiences, because I think we all know, as marketers and even owners of companies, that internal message is going to be a little different than what you would say to your customers, and the balance between that is something that can definitely be met. However, that story element really needs to be more emphatic with the internal folks, because that way, if they can utilize that story to go out and do their job on a daily basis and effectively build the buildings, the structures and the facilities that you're building, that just only enhances the brand, and it strengthens the story beyond what you're currently at. And I think the other thing that you should expect is diligence. Diligence is definitely needed, because it's going to take probably 6 to 12 months to really get the story to be embedded, not only internally but externally as well. And the diligence to stay with the plan and tell the story over time is really where those expectations, I think, can be met. And it is effective once that story is established. So to that point, I think it's vital that you, as a general contractor or the marketer for the general contractor, you need to invest in it. And I'm not saying that simply because I am in my business relies on that. What I'm saying is, if you're going to take the time to develop it, if you're going to take the time to put in place the social media functions, the website aspects of things, and whether it's video or photography or some way to explain the story, there has to be an investment by the company. And that really will help to not only translate into success, but more importantly, it will help it helps your customers understand who they should hire. And I can't emphasize that enough, because that is the biggest component of a story, is the simple component of it that addresses a need and engages with your customer so that they can make the decision to hire you. That's ultimately what it comes down to. So, moving forward here, I think it's vital to also to come back to that challenge that I issued at the beginning of our discussion, and that is again breaking free from that traditional mindset of safe, on time, and on budget, because now we have the ability to look at our businesses from a different light, and that is to tell a story that really translates for your customers. And that's the goal. That is the goal of every marketing department. That's the goal of every owner. That's the goal of agencies, at least from my perspective, I believe. You should be looking for companies that are going to support that. And again, that is, that support comes in the form of helping your customers understand who they should hire. And that's really what it comes down to from the story element. Thank you. I think I went a little bit sooner, or I finished a little bit sooner than anticipated, but I'd love to offer any services moving forward. If you have any questions, by all means, please feel free to reach out, email, LinkedIn, feel free to call. I'd love to help and offer any support that is possible. And more importantly, if you have ideas or thoughts, bounce ideas off of someone, we're here to help. With that, I believe I'm going to hand it over to Rick, who's going to handle the question component.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for that very informative presentation. It's important to all of us to hear what's going out there in the industry, so that was very good. For those of you that are attendees, if you want to ask Chris a question, please go ahead and type it into the panel there, and I will get those to Chris as soon as possible. I do have one here that I'm trying to see. Oh, there it is. How do we get past the clients that only want the lowest price and don't want to hear our story? That's a good one.
That is a very good question, Sarah. I would say, one, you want to reinforce your story over and over and over again. And at that point, two, also really emphasize that uniqueness of your business. And if they still want to really focus on the bottom line, that has to become, I believe, a business decision, whether you want to pursue that or not. But I would emphasize, the uniqueness of the company. Are there technical capabilities that are different than others in the market? And then from there, really just keep hammering that story over and over and over again. And ultimately, it will get past that.
And that came from Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. So, Chris, I have one for you. As a business developer myself, and I know there's marketers out there and owners, we're always trying to find out the current trends in the market, where we do our market research. The one I have for you is, how do I obtain data to evaluate trends?
Well, that's a great question. Rick, that's a really good question. So what I typically tell people is focus on what you have first. So, for example, whether that is your social media, are people engaging with you? Are there likes? Are there conversations on your social media platforms? The other aspect of it is if your website doesn't have analytics, get that on there as soon as possible. Google Analytics are a great tool. There are others on the market, but that's probably the easiest. But look at ways that you can really start to gather information from your customers, and to that point too, look at internal reviews and the aspects of project completion surveys. And then ultimately, when you're at a need where you want to go beyond that, you can look at SEO rankings or SEM rankings. You could get into the whole sales funnel aspect of qualified leads versus unqualified leads, and even utilize email marketing as a way to get that data so that you have the ability to make solid decisions. And that's really what it comes down to.
And I have another one here that I think is really important for all of us. What are the 3 most important tactics needed to get in front of a customer? That's such an important point. You know, how do we get ourselves in front of them? What do you have in mind there, Chris?
Yeah, another good question. Well, I think the way that people go about researching and looking into companies has changed so much just in the last 5 years. I mean, think about it. If you're at a networking function and you meet someone, typically the first thing that you do, there might be a couple different variations to this, but you're either going to go to their website or you're going to look at them on LinkedIn. And then from there, there's going to be some more research. You know, there's plenty of research available and data that says about 60% of all consumer purchases are made before they even get to the point of wanting to make the purchase. So I think that's the first thing is that you have to accept the fact that people are looking and researching different companies in a different way. So I would say the 3 most important things are having that story very, very defined, very focused, and then having all of your support elements, the web, your social media presence, even if you're making collateral materials and brochures and even responses to proposals. How those things are together and supported to really tell that story is, I think, important. And then lastly, really emphasize the experience that you bring, because I think that's going to be a very, very strong element within the construction industry, and to go from there.
You talked earlier about brand with Nike and Amazon, and those are 2 companies that we admire, obviously. So how do we build the perception or promise of our companies? I mean, that's really a big effort.
Yes, it is. And you know, admittedly, the examples that I gave with Nike and Amazon, I mean, those companies have been around for decades. So they've had the advantage that they have is that they've been able to build their story over time. And to that point, I think it's important to have, or not so much to have, but to focus on the KISS principle. I'm a huge proponent of that. Keep it simple. And more importantly, keep it focused, I think is one of the elements of the perception. And because if you keep it focused and simple, then you can build it out over time. And just like in real estate, you know, it's location, location, location. And in our business and marketing and communications, it is repetition, repetition, repetition. And the more that you can get that simple, focused story in front of your customers, the better it's going to be. That's the way that we would build the perception of a brand over time.
You talked about story. How do I develop my story, my company? How do we develop that? How do we get that out there in the marketplace?
Well, I think that the first thing is really determining what makes you unique. What makes your company different than anybody else in the market. And if you're a national contractor, really try to focus on the market that you're working in. If you're a smaller contractor in a more of a regional component, again, really emphasize what makes you unique. And I have found that engaging with your customers is extremely important. And that aspect of having opportunities, having face time, having the ability to ask people what they think of your story, is very, very important, because if not, you're never going to know if your story's resonating and is it hitting home.
So, question I have here for you, another one is, of the challenges you mentioned, and there are many, which will be the hardest to overcome?
Another good question, Rick. I believe the hardest thing is that traditional mindset. And the reason for that is, you know, it's so easy to say, you know, we've been focused on safe, on time, and on budget for decades, and it's worked. But really looking at ways to set your business apart and really tell stories in a way that helps people make decisions is going to be a challenge, because, I mean, let's face it, you know, the traditional aspect of construction, and I see from some of the other questions that are coming in, you know, there are some challenges in that traditional mindset.
I'm trying to see the question. You said there was some other questions coming in here. It says, okay.
Go ahead.
Here,
Sorry.
I see one. It's, how do you handle a situation where the construction business doesn't have the budget, or they don't understand the need to invest in BD or to tell a story? They believe it's sort of fluff and not necessary. How do you address that?
I think the biggest challenge there is that the people that are making those decisions are I'm assuming, are very traditional in their approach and really are focused on more profit than building the business. And so I think that the aspect of changing perceptions is going to be led by data. So for example, I'm going to make something up from my past experience. I worked for a general contractor, and he didn't want to advertise in the industry publication. And so I worked with the sales team at the industry publication to give us the opportunities, or I'm sorry, not the opportunities, but the data to make the opportunity valid in his mind. And in this case, the owner of the GC was really focusing to enter into new markets, and in particular, he really wanted to focus on the healthcare market. So he just was very hesitant to start to advertise his business in a healthcare-focused trade publication. And so really kind of showed him, here's the people that we can expect, here are the decision makers, and more importantly, how is it going to impact the business moving forward? And it did help. I mean, now he's one of the largest healthcare and residential home care facility builders in Pennsylvania. So my answer to you would be, look at data and generate as much information that you can to really help the decision maker in your company handle that. Hopefully that answered your question, Lynn.
Okay, I don't see any more questions, and I don't have any more questions. If anyone wants to ask one more, please go ahead and type it in the screen. Any final comments you want to make, Chris, about your presentation here?
Thank you. Thank you for all the questions, and more importantly, thank you for taking the time today to listen. Hopefully this was helpful for you, and again, if you have any additional questions, by all means, contact Paige and or me, myself directly, or Rick, and we'll get those answered. But again, thank you. Hopefully the story approach will help you and really help to change the perception of the industry over time.
Okay,
Perfect.
thank you, Chris.
Well,
all right, back to you, Paige.
Thanks, Rick. For those folks on the phone, I know we covered a lot of information in a short amount of time. I just really want to thank Chris Martin for his time today. He dedicated his time and talent for this presentation, and we are grateful to you, Chris, and also Rick Guzman, who did a great job moderating our questions. So thank you both. Before we conclude today, I did want to leave everyone with some next steps on getting connected with the Business Development Forum. As we said in the beginning, both Chris and Rick are outstanding members of our steering committee. and we'd love to get you all more engaged in our business development forum. So one upcoming event we have is an in-person forum meeting. It's being held in conjunction with AGC's BuildCon and the Joint Contractors Conference event coming up November 5th through 8th in Tucson, Arizona. For those of you who aren't familiar with BuildCon, it's the annual Building Contractors Conference AGC of America puts on. And this year we are co-locating with the Highway and Utility Division conferences. So it should be great opportunities for cross-collaboration. We'll have some joint programming as well. And the in-person business development meeting is going to be held from 3 to 5 on Tuesday, November 5th, right before the conference kicks off. And all our forum members, AGC members, are invited to attend that event. For those wondering how the BD Forum works, what initiatives we're working on, how you can get involved, I really highly recommend that you attend that meeting to get started and get connected. And after today's presentation, I will send up follow-up information to all our attendees on how to get registered after following today's presentation. There are some other opportunities to get involved in the BD Forum, including authoring a one-page best practice article. We submit those monthly to our membership, and we're always looking for new authors. And you are also welcome to present a BD webinar for our forum members. If you're interested in either of those opportunities, please contact me for more details, and I'm happy to connect you. When you exit today's webinar, you should see a very brief survey about today's presentation. Please take a minute to complete it. We do read them. Your input is very valuable to AGC and to our Business Development Forum Steering Committee. They're looking for additional BD Forum topics to cover with these educational webinars. So please send me any of your burning BD questions, and we're happy to answer them for you. A reminder also, within the next 3 to 5 business days, all registered participants will receive a link to the PowerPoint slides and a link to the audio recording of this webinar. If you want to learn more about business development and the Business Development Forum with AGC, please visit us through our website, agc.org/BD, and you can find us through our LinkedIn account. We hope that you've all enjoyed this AGC of America program, Value of Marketing Communications for Contractors. Thank you all for participating. This concludes today's session.